Come on, bitch, let's go. Come on, get ready, bitches. You haven't seen nothing yet. Come on.
Valentino, Versace, Lamborghini, Bugatti. I got money to burn. I'm single and I'm naughty.
Come on.
Tiffany's, Cartier, Gucci, Armani.
Come on.
Break out your black card, boys. It's time to party.
Hi, you guys. Well, there's so many things I want to talk about. First and foremost, I mean, a bunch of things kind of came out to do with Epstein. Allegedly, Ghislaine Maxwell is talking to the DOJ about the Clintons, and so now they're subpoenaing the Clintons. We're going to do more than Epstein today, but I had to call out a few things. It turns out that a girl who was trans had filed a police report against Epstein. And this was back in 2007, but no one believed her because she was trans, and also she had gotten her age wrong in the fight. But if you read the small print, you can see why that happened. Anyway, I'll explain that later. And then on top of that, trans person ignored, we found out that a young woman by the name of Alicia Arden had a run-in with Epstein where she filed a police report. I think it was back in 1997, right after Maria Farmer did, and hers was ignored. Well, this woman did too, and nobody did anything, and she wants to know who's responsible. I'll play you the clip from Gloria Allred's press conference she did. It's just like a few minutes, but it tells the story of what she endured at the Shutters Hotel in Santa Monica with Jeffrey Epstein, which also got ignored. I guess there's something like 1,000 people that Gloria Allred believes has been impacted as a victim in some way or another by Jeffrey Epstein, and they just don't understand why things were handled the way they were for so long. And obviously the undertone is that there's some really high level of corruption surrounding this at the highest levels, right, at the governmental level. And I'm going to tell you who I think might be involved with that, of course, with a big deep dive to back it up behind it, like you guys like. And you can give me your thoughts as you learn about all this. Also, a bunch of people making allegations that Virginia Giuffre lied about Prince Andrew, which I'm going to talk about and give you my opinion on, and you guys can see how you feel about it. After just, 4 or 5 weeks ago, I just covered Kelly Clarkson and the mystery of what's going on with her. And at the end of that confessional video in the Patreon, as you guys know, I came to the conclusion that it was because obviously her husband was sick and that Kelly wasn't having any sort of breakdown as was reported in some of the tabloids, that it was really her husband who was having the issue. And we got into all of their marital woes in that confessional video, which is obviously adding to the complexity of, the demise of that whole relationship. He had moved on with another woman. Nobody's even mentioning her in the fact that he just died. Right? He just died of melanoma, skin cancer, which metastasized and killed him. But sadly, Kelly Clarkson, has 2 children, 9 and 11, and they are devastated over the loss of their father. They don't know about, the things that happened in the relationship with Kelly Clarkson. For the kids, this is like end of the world stuff. So Kelly has called off her tour for the rest of the month in Vegas in August, and she's focusing on the kids, and rightfully so. The family's crushed. Reba McEntire was his stepmother for a long time. Anyway, if you haven't seen that confessional video, I bring it up because I want you to go watch that now. Oh God, to understand what's going on with Kelly Clarkson, her kids, and the dynamics of his passing, you should listen to that show. It's really going to help you understand how hard this is on her. So another part of today's show is going to be Real Housewives of Beverly Hills tea that has come out over the last week, which of course incorporates Denise Richards because she's allegedly been casted in some way for the upcoming season, coming in late to the gang, and this has allegedly pissed off Rachel Zoe. We're going to get into that too. And of course, in true Dana form, I've somehow tied Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and Andy Cohen in theme to Epstein. So get ready. We're going to have some fun today.
Come on, bitch, let's go.
So let's start by talking about the very exciting news for pop culture people and political connoisseurs that the Clintons have been subpoenaed by the, House of Representatives to appear before them and be asked questions to do with their relationship with Epstein. This is obviously pretty shocking stuff. And what were the grounds of the sudden turn of events? Well, it was, of course, that Ghislaine Maxwell was interviewed by the DOJ in Tallahassee, Florida, before she was moved to Byron Prison, which is where she resides with Jen Shaw and Elizabeth Holmes. Although the Clintons said they barely knew Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, it turns out that Bill Clinton, based on what Maxwell allegedly told the DOJ, traveled the world with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and spent a lot of time with them. And they were very close to Bill Clinton. Now, why do I think they're bringing Hillary in? I think they want to know her position on Bill Clinton's relationship with Epstein and Ghislaine, since they're married. So she should know, right? Why was he going on all these trips? And also Hillary might have some insight if, let's say, Bill Clinton received any kind of money or funding for any of his initiatives or charitable projects or whatever from Epstein. Hillary might have some commentary on it. Now, you can't lie to Congress. And if you're caught doing that, it's as bad as lying to the FBI. Now, we don't know if the FBI did a 302 on Clinton in regards to the criminal case to do with Epstein. Was he at all interviewed by the feds about being on the logs of the Lolita Express going to the islands? The feds definitely were aware that Virginia Giuffre had made several claims under oath and also in her memoir, Billionaires Playboy Club, which I covered a little bit of last week in a different way. They would have been aware of this. So did they interview the Clintons for a 302 for the criminal case? I don't know the answer. But if they did, and they said they barely knew him, and Ghislaine saying, no, I did know them really well, and so did Epstein, then that might make them be lying to the FBI. Now, will they do anything about it? I don't know, because we all know that rich people don't get really punished, and people that are heads of big, powerful companies don't get punished because usually they're hiring many ex-prosecutors still very well connected at the DOJ to work for them and their large corporations and businesses. So that keeps them safe. And it also means that if they want to retaliate on people, that criminal cases get taken up much quicker. Why? Because they make one phone call, prosecutor to ex-prosecutor in the office that they work in, usually in the same territory that they came up in, right? And they get that complaint filed much quicker than the average Joe filing through one of these, informal complaint sites if you want to report fraud or something else. Now, let's talk about Clinton's involvement with Epstein, which I think you might enjoy from a very factual perspective versus a sensationalized one. So let's start with Clinton's mentions in the Billionaires Playboy Club, which is a partially fictionalized story that Virginia Giuffre wrote to publish a book about her experiences in this group of elites and famous people that are doing all these debauchery type things, right? And so she was going to publish this book. Some of it's true, some of it's loosely true, some of it's not true at all, right? And some people really struggle with that because they're like, well, if she's writing a fictional book about these experiences with these people like Prince Andrew, does that mean it's all a lie and all of the things she said is a lie? Now, that is a massive leap to make. I see some really powerful influencers that have been to the White House making that assessment or trying to say that they think that is a reason not to believe Virginia Giuffre at all, right? Oh, well, she wrote a fictional book. Don't believe anything that she said. I think that's a stretch, right? Most books are written from people's experiences that are real, and they use them as launch pads to write more sensationalized versions of stories, certainly to sell books. But in the case of Virginia Giuffre, that's not what ends up happening. She uses this book as part of her evidence, not to say necessarily that these people did the things in her book, but that, there was a basis of truth in these things, which is where the the book was inspired from. Now, some people say, no, that's not true. She tried to say that book was real. And then later she sort of backtracked on that and made it that in her affidavit that it was a fictionalized version of events. And to that, maybe she did. Maybe she was afraid of this exact thing, that if she admitted that she had a fictionalized thing out there that loosely based on the truth, that nothing she said in the beginning would be believed. Plus, some people also call out, hey, listen, she was a recruiter as much as Ghislaine was. She did exactly what Ghislaine did. She reached out to girls. She dressed them up in slutty clothes so they could service Epstein. She knew he was into young girls, underage, and older girls, and that he was taking advantage of them. Why didn't she end up in jail? Why did she get a ton of money as a victim and get touted as part of the Me Too movement? Well, you wouldn't be wrong in that criticism. That's a very strong problem people have with the Clinton-Epstein case. They're like, hey, wait a minute, what makes this girl a victim and this girl a madam? Because it seems to me a lot of them are madams and victims. And then why isn't Ghislaine one then? And obviously we learned from the Maria Farmer interview that Ghislaine and Epstein weren't really having that much sex. So what was her role for him? Was she a shill? Was she a way to make the young girls feel comfortable, to defraud them into believing they were safe when they weren't? Those are some of the allegations Maria Farmer brings up in her interview, which I covered in the last 2 episodes, only in the Patreon, that part. So the reality is those criticisms are viable and they're a position you could take. But since I've been around a lot of rich people that do really fucked up shit, I'm like going to say that Virginia probably witnessed a lot of stuff that she also took part in, right? And maybe did things that were illegal, but she was the one who whistleblowed. And lucky her, just like in the federal DOJ system that everybody's following, right? You're allowed to get immunity and rewarded if you whistleblow. Yes, even if you were the worst. Although they don't like to do that. But even if you're the worst, if it's valuable enough, they'll do it. And that likely is what happened in a way with Virginia Giuffre. So what do I think happened with Virginia Giuffre in this book? I think number one, she wasn't sure from her memory some things. So she was really scared to call it a true event that occurred, right? Because she could have gotten things wrong and gotten people mixed up. And so she was like nervous about saying it was actually like a true story through and through. That's number one. Number two, I think she was worried about retaliation and lawsuits. And so in her memoir, I think she was scared when that became public that there might be some backlash on that for her. But if I was to gamble, I'm going to say 90 to 85% of what she says in that book is pretty bang on to what she either did, experienced, or did for other people. So I would like to just focus on the rich, powerful men that she called out. Now, in the Billionaire's Playbook, she says the following. Giuffre wrote about her experiences being trafficked as an underage girl and how she spotted numerous powerful players in Epstein's social circle, including Al Gore and Bill Clinton. In one moment of the book, she says that she saw Bill Clinton on the Caribbean island that Epstein owned with 2 beautiful girls around either arm. She says she witnessed Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Matt Groening, and Glenn Dubin all doing really morally corrupt things. Well, Faye Resnick, the morally corrupt Faye Resnick, has been replaced by these guys. Never had a bad experience with Faye Resnick, by the way, and I met her a few times. Now, she also said in her legal depositions and court cases, she said she witnessed Bill Clinton staying at Epstein's house on the island. And she said specifically, Ghislaine, Emmy, another girl who was allegedly a regular at Epstein's house. And there was 2 young girls that I could identify. I never really knew them well anyways. It was just 2 girls from New York. Let me read this from page 56. The next big dinner party on the island had another significant guest appearance, being the one and only Bill Clinton. He is the only president in the world to be dismissed from his role as a world leader because he was caught with his trousers around his ankles and had the stain to prove it. Publicly humiliating his wife and himself, he retired from his title, but not from his lifestyle. This wasn't a big party as such, only a few of us eating at the dinner table. There was Giuffre at the head of it all. hall. As always, on the left side was Emmy, Galen, and I. Sitting across the table from us was Bill with two lovely girls who were visiting from New York. Bill's wife, Hillary's absence from the night made it easy for his apparent provocative, cheeky side to come out, teasing the girls on either side of him with playful pokes and brassy comments. There was no modesty between any of them. We all finished our meals and scattered in our own different directions. Jeffrey wanted his evening massage before bed, and Ghislaine and Emmy went to their office to talk about something, leaving our guest of honor to find company elsewhere. Strolling into the darkness with two beautiful girls around either arm, Bill seemed content to retire for the evening. He wanted to have a hot bath before bed while I began the massage in the tub, and they were all staying at Epstein's house on the island. She was also asked in a deposition about whether or not Epstein said that Bill Clinton owed him favors. And she answered that question with, yes, I do. It was a laugh, though. He would laugh it off. You know, I remember asking Jeffrey what Bill Clinton's doing here on Epstein Island kind of thing. And he laughed it off and said, well, he owes me favors. He never told me what the favors were. I never knew. I didn't know if he was serious. Then she was asked, did former President Bill Clinton, among other men, were they aware of Epstein's activity? And she said, yes, he would be a witness because he knew what my purpose there was for Giuffre, and he visited Giuffre's island. And Giuffre Epstein, by the way, she said, wasn't very shy about admitting to people that there was sexual activity involving girls on the island. So we know what this is like, right? Like Hugh Hefner wasn't shy about the Playboy parties. The girls came naked in paint. And it was pretty, clear. You couldn't bring in a camera. You could take drugs there if you could get them in, it's not like some great mystery of what's going on, right? I mean, I went to a lot of them. And that doesn't mean everyone's partaking, but it's there for sure. And you kind of get what it is. So I think that's what she meant about people being aware of it. Like Epstein has a bunch of models hanging around him. And if you like models and you want to get some action, go hang out with Epstein. But to be really clear, Virginia Giuffre did not make any direct allegations against Bill Clinton, just that she saw him around and what I just told you. Now, if you remember, Ghislaine Maxwell said that Virginia Giuffre was telling obvious lies. And then Virginia Giuffre sued Ghislaine Maxwell in 2017 and supplied tons and tons of evidence to say, hey, lady, you defamed me, including her unpublicized manuscript. And on May 24th, 2017, they settled the case and Ghislaine Maxwell paid Virginia Giuffre millions of dollars. What's really important to remind you of is this defamation case is actually what launched the criminal case against Ghislaine Maxwell. So if Ghislaine had not said that Virginia was a liar about her experience with Epstein, then she may have avoided the trafficking case, okay? Because it all started here. But she called her a liar, and then all this evidence came out that was supplied by Virginia Giuffre, and that basically built the case for the Southern District of New York to take a criminal case around Ghislaine, and then all they had to do was sort of ignore the Epstein Palm Beach settlement and move forward. So here's the problem. Virginia Giuffre, in a fictionalized book and in actual deposition under oath testimony, says all of these things I just told you about Clinton. But Clinton himself says, no, I have never been to St. James Island, and I don't know what Virginia Giuffre is talking about. But then when you're just about to write Virginia Giuffre off as a nut job, then what happens is another girl comes forward and says, actually, I also saw Clinton with two young girls on Epstein Island, like around him on either arm. And I can corroborate that I also saw Clinton with girls on either arm on Epstein Island. Okay. Now, Clinton admitted to going on the Lolita Express. But he said, listen, I went once to Europe, once to Asia, and twice to Africa. And it was between 2002 and 2003. And that's only a total of 4 trips. And it was all in connection with the Clinton Foundation, which of course Hillary Clinton would also be involved with. Now, here's another problem. A bunch of, journalists went out and they looked at the logbooks that were released, and they were kind of redacted and they were hard to read, but somebody actually spent the time doing this. And they found that there was anywhere between 12 and 26 times that Clinton seemed to be on the log for the private jet. So that isn't 4 times. And even some went as far as to say that he was without any security detail on 4 or 5 of those flights. So he was kind of flying under the radar with Epstein at these times. Now, the pilot, Larry Visosky, also saw Clinton on his plane, but he didn't really say how many times he saw him on the plane. It should be noted that he also didn't think Ghislaine and Epstein were sleeping together. He saw them more as like couple, but friends versus sexual partners. Now, just so you guys know, Little St. James is in the U.S. In the U.S. Virgin Islands, it's a U.S. overseas territory, therefore we control it. And all international flights, you have to be really conscious of the log on private jets, but not so much when you're flying within the U.S. And so we will never really know how accurate the logs were for the plane, okay? Because they were mainly U.S., including to the island. Now, the Secret Service, if you want to trust what they said that the Clintons never went to Epstein Island. And then after they did an investigation, they couldn't find any proof that he had ever gone there. And remember, these alleged trips supposedly happened on Epstein's jet right after he comes off his presidency and the 2 to 3 years that follows. That's really important because the problem with Clinton, sadly for him, is there's an enormous amount of women, especially during this exact time that he allegedly is cheating on Hillary Clinton yet again, that say he did inappropriate things against them. Now, let me take you through them because you probably can't remember them all. There's so many. So first, we've got Juanita Broaddrick. She's 35 years old. She meets Bill Clinton in 1978. He's the Arkansas Attorney General at the time, and he does a really lovely sort of charitable stop by a nursing home, and she's working there. Well, she alleges that he said, let's go to a room away from the lobby and have a coffee together. And she said that Bill Clinton forced himself on her, and that at the end of it all, she felt that Hillary Clinton used her influence to cover it up. And there was quite a lot of evidence that might have actually happened. I could take you through some of it if you'd like. Let me just give you 2. David P. Shippers, who was the chief investigator during the Clinton impeachment trials for the House Judiciary Committee for the Republicans, said that he found Broaddrick to be the most credible witness they had ever spoken to, but chose not to use the story in the trial since it had, quote, no specific bearing on the impeachable offenses. NBC News had one of their anchors, Lisa Myers, interview Juanita Broaddrick for Dateline. This was on the day that Bill Clinton was being impeached by the House of Representatives in 1998. In this interview, allegedly, she stated clearly that she had been R-worded by Bill Clinton in 1978, but for some reason, NBC did not air the explosive interview until after the president was acquitted by the Senate in February of 1999. She never took any civil litigation against him, and it just died on the vine. Let's move on. Let's do one from the Democratic perspective. Now, remember, I'm civilly dead. I don't give a shit either way. I just think that, somebody R-word somebody, and, they say serial entrepreneur, serial sexual assaulter of young women, that they probably should be looked at, right? No matter who they are, no matter how powerful they are. So let's do it from a different side. Now, we've got one from November of 2017. Sources within the Democratic Party, which is what Bill Clinton was a part of, told an author and former foreign editor of Newsweek, Edward Klein, that Clinton was being accused of sexually assaulting 4 women, okay? And they all allegedly happened in the early 2000s at the same time he was on the Lolita Express, taking his 4 trips, if you want to go by what he's saying. And so this is all in that same period. 4 women come forward, and they were approximately from the ages of 17 to 19 years old when this occurs. That's a pattern. But you have to believe Edward Klein on that one to go for that one. Maybe you don't think Edward Klein from Newsweek is credible. I don't know. I'm just saying that's what he said. Then there was Kathleen Willey. She told 60 Minutes that Clinton had groped her in the Oval Office in 1993, but I have no idea how old she was. Paula Jones also said, if you remember, that Clinton had exposed himself to her in an Arkansas hotel room in May of 1991. So what she's implying happened is Clinton comes in and he thinks that Paula maybe likes him, and so he goes from 0 to 60 as soon as he gets in the hotel room because he thinks it's game on. He takes his clothes off, and Paula's like, wait a minute, I didn't want to do this, right? Now that I could see happening every day of the week. Let's face it, when you're seduced by an upper guy, it's almost always goes down like that, right? And then there was a woman named Leslie Milwee. She claimed in 2016 that Clinton, as the governor of Arkansas in 1980, sexually assaulted her on 3 separate occasions while she worked at Arkansas TV station, which was I guess their local TV station. And she said that it was, around the 1980s. Now think about that, right? She's trying to get a story. So maybe she's talking to Clinton and giving him a lot of attention, and she's obviously good looking if she's working as an anchor or a journalist. Let's just call it what it is. And maybe she was like, oh my God, he's going to give me a big story. And then instead he gives her something else. How can we forget Monica Lewinsky, who had a consensual relationship with Clinton behind Hillary's back when she was an intern working for him at the White House? She was in her early 20s, I think, at the time. Now, this always blew my mind, and I wanted to remind you of this. She said that she had 9 sexual encounters, those were what she was willing to admit, with President Bill Clinton in the Oval Office. This was between November 1995 and March 1997. But what's really shocking about these encounters is they only involve oral sex and other sex acts, but never sexual intercourse. Now, why would that be? I can't wait to get your thoughts on that. I'm going to leave that one to you. But now remember all the lying that was going around about Monica Lewinsky. First, she signs an affidavit saying it never happened because she's scared. Then when the impeachment case moves forward and she's given immunity, she hands over the blue dress, the famous blue dress that has Clinton's DNA on it. We really don't want to know what that is, but we all know what that is. And and you guys know it all comes out, right? So he ends up getting impeached by the House. He gets acquitted by the Senate. He's held in civil contempt, and he's fined $90,000, plus he pays $850,000 to Paula Jones to settle her lawsuit. He has his law license suspended. He's disbarred from practicing before the Supreme Court. He finishes out his presidency, and nobody cares that he lied to the American people while being president of the United States on television when he uttered the famous words, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky," even though he did. And let's remember, all while being married, okay? Not single president. Nope, married president. So let's just suffice it to say that Bill Clinton's track record with women, with lying, with all these things, that whether he's a Republican, Democrat, or from Star Wars' Galactic Republic, either way, the guy isn't trustworthy and has a behavior pattern of essentially trying to get on with women whenever humanly possible, if they're good looking, in his opinion, or maybe he's had a few drinks. Who knows? I'm just guessing. Well, either way, it's all up for discussion. Anyway, he's been subpoenaed. it is my point. So let's see how this one goes. Now, if you remember, Maria Farmer, there was proof, filed a police report in 1996, but it was largely ignored. So she is like technically the first person to ever really call out what Jeffrey Epstein was doing. She was not the only early person. There was another one named Alicia Arden, and I'm going to now play you the Gloria Allred press conference that just dropped a few days ago with Alicia's story.
Thank you for coming today. I'm attorney Gloria Allred, and today we are here with the first victim to have documented proof that she filed a police report against Jeffrey Epstein. In 1997, Alicia Arden, who is here with me today, filed a police report with the Santa Monica Police Department alleging that Jeffrey Epstein committed a sexual battery against her when she met him at the Shutters Hotel in Santa Monica, California. Mr. Epstein said that he was a representative of Victoria's Secret and that he was interviewing and auditioning models to appear in the Victoria's Secret catalog. When Alicia realized that Epstein was using his position to touch her in a sexually inappropriate way, she left and reported him to the police. The details of what happened to Alicia in that room with Mr. Epstein were explained at a press conference that Alicia and I held in 2020. We will forward those details to the press who request them. Unfortunately, no prosecution ever took place. Alicia alleges that she would have been willing to testify against Jeffrey Epstein if the criminal case had been filed, but that never happened. Alicia feels that if Epstein had been forced to face the consequences of his criminal behavior at that time, perhaps many other women and children could have been spared from the sexual abuse and sex trafficking that many were forced to suffer. The failure of the criminal justice system to bring Jeffrey Epstein to meaningful justice was repeated in the cases of many other victims over decades after Alicia's experience with him, and resulted in Jeffrey Epstein's misconduct becoming worse and leading to child sexual abuse and trafficking of underage girls. It included his friend and co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction for conspiracy to entice minors to travel to engage in sexual acts, conspiracy to transport minors to participate in illegal sexual act, transporting a minor to participate in illegal sexual acts, sex trafficking, conspiracy, and sex trafficking of a minor. She was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for her crimes. Now, decades later, the public and many of Epstein and Maxwell's victims are insisting that they want to know how Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were able to get away with their crimes for so many years. They also want to know who else may have enabled them or assisted them in their sexual exploitation and trafficking of women and children. They believe that the answers are in the unreleased files of the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York and the files of the former United States Attorney for the Southern District of Florida and the State Attorney's file in Miami.
Oh, so do I, Gloria, so do I. Now I'm going to tell you about this poor trans woman who, when she was 16, was allegedly exploited by Epstein, and she screamed and shouted from the rooftops, suing him for money and everything. Her name was Ava Cordero, and nobody listened. It actually appeared in the newspapers, but everybody ignored it. It was like under the headline, gender bender, shocker, she, and then they put parentheses, he has a history, bogus sex suit, kinky sex suit gal is a man. It was covered in the Post and the Times of Israel. And it would appear that she had filed a lawsuit against a lawyer and also filed a lawsuit against Jeffrey Epstein. So people started to say, oh, she must be trying to make money off these men and maybe it isn't real what she's saying. Although one of the articles did show a picture of her with the attorney like on his lap. Anyway, they used the fact that she tried to do this twice as a way to discredit her, besides, of course, her being trans and them having a ball making fun of her. So in her lawsuit to Epstein, she said she had been brought up in a foster home and, quote, never celebrated her birthday as a child. She wasn't totally sure of her age because they caught her in a little bit, I guess, of a discrepancy where she was saying that she was 17 and she was really 19. Anyway, she blames the foster care system that she didn't really know how old she was, and she can't believe that's what everyone's focusing on, but he uses that to get that thrown out, and we move on to Epstein. She said that she goes up to an Upper East Side mansion back in 2000, and she goes to the billionaire's house and she tells him, I'm 16 years old and I want to be a model. Then she said she was lured into a sexual relationship with the premise of help with her modeling career, and that she suffered severe and serious injuries to various and diverse parts of her person, experiencing great pain and suffering, and was required and will be required to have medical aid and psychiatric help in the future. Well, she was also, I guess, going out with her really ugly attorney too, who was helping her file these cases, which of course didn't add to her credibility at the time. So it was just a lot stacked against this transgender girl. You know, she did drugs. She was from a foster system. She was trying to be a model. There was a lot going on here. So the problem was that they used all of these things, including her transgenderness, to say she had no credibility. But in truth, now we know that her claim against Epstein was probably true. So now simultaneously, the DOJ has asked the judges if they can release the exhibits that they feel the public hasn't seen regarding some of the testimony that was given by the victims. So far, the judges have said no to protect the victims, but now DOJ is pushing forward on that. Meanwhile, Trump's saying that he doesn't believe Ghislaine Maxwell or anything she says, which is why he hasn't been, I guess, that kind of into trying to support Ghislaine in any way since this communication all started a few days ago. But let me play this. This is CBS News talking about what the DOJ is trying to release, allegedly.
Has not necessarily been fully in the public record, the Department of Justice says at least, is what is in the exhibits. Potentially could be pictures, videos, other information. The Department of Justice saying in a court filing today that they are going to ask these judges who are overseeing both the Maxwell unsealing and the Epstein documents unsealing to consider to release these exhibits. They say they've asked until August 14th to give them some time to notify additional parties who are not already in those initial batches of transcripts. And again, this comes as the Department of Justice is looking for a deliverable to come out of this in some way or another, whether it's what was in that Maxwell conversation a couple of weeks ago with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, whether it was in this initial batch of grand jury testimony transcripts from law enforcement, or potentially, and it looks like this might actually be a place where there could be some new information, whether it's meaningful or not to the Trump administration remains to be seen, could be in these grand jury exhibits. The Department of Justice, again, moving through the court slowly to kind of provide step by step what judges are asking for, and making sure, most importantly in this process, that the victims' identities are protected, and while anyone else who potentially could be implicated in this are not, which is what the victims have asked for.
Well, going back full circle to Virginia Giuffre, remember the main thing that Virginia Giuffre swore under oath was that she had had 3 sexual encounters with Prince Andrew in London, New York, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. 2 when she was 17. And this was, again, in this time period where we were talking about earlier with, the Clinton kind of getting out of office and also hanging out with Epstein. Well, Prince Andrew, obviously, the result of what happened with that and Virginia. She also claimed to have slept with Alan Dershowitz, but she retracted it and said she wasn't sure she really slept with him. And then she said she slept with former U.S. Senator George Mitchell. He denied it. Former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, he denied it. So I think it's important to look at the person's pattern, not just what's claimed in Virginia Giuffre's book. So let's just jump to today, why don't we? And let's look at the news on Prince Andrew, because the book just came out called Entitled, and it was published by the Daily Mail. Lucky for us, I've got a membership to Daily Mail. And well, it turns out that Prince Andrew slept with 11 different women before his first anniversary anniversary with Fergie. And also, I guess much later, Fergie cheated on him, and the whole dirty laundry has now been exposed. Oh, we have so much more to cover. Did you guys know that Rick Hilton, Kathy Hilton's husband, was in Virginia Giuffre's book? I'm also going to tell you about that, but now we got to go on the Patreon. For the full scoop, join the Dishing Drama Dana Patreon. The link is in this audio description. It's only $6 a month, and you'll get the best information and tea about the things you care about, and even the things you don't know you care about. What are you waiting for?